Let's talk about Wilds of Eldraine Commander Best of the Worst. That's the top 3 cards from that set that are seeing play in 1% or less of decks, according to EDHREC, since that set's release. Coming in at number 3, we have Knick-Knack Oofy. For green and X, we get a 1/1 creature Oofy. Knick-Knack Oofy enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. When Knick-Knack Oofy enters the battlefield, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of aura cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then, put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield on the bottom of your library in a random order. Knick-Knack Oofy is very specific, and it's specific to an archetype that isn't very popular or powerful, which is auras. However, if you are in the aura archetype, I think this is one of the best creatures that's been printed for that archetype in a very long time. It's going to dig through your deck and put those auras directly onto the battlefield. They don't have to go onto the Knick-Knack Oofy. They can go onto one of your other creatures that doesn't have summoning sickness and can attack right away with the massive advantage that you get off of the Oofy. So I think that if you are in the auras deck, this is actually really good. Coming in at number 2, we have Shadow Puppeteers. For 6 and a blue, we get a 4/4 creature, Fairy Wizard, with Flying and Ward 2. When Shadow Puppeteers enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 Fairy Rogue creature tokens with Flying. Whenever a creature you control with Flying attacks, you may have it become a red dragon with base power and toughness 4/4 in addition to its other colors and types until end of turn. Shadow Puppeteers does ask a lot from you, being that it's such a high mana value card, but where I think it's going to be really interesting is in a deck that cares a lot about giving your creatures haste. If you're already giving your creatures haste, then this can come down and swing for 12 damage the turn that it comes out, and that's pretty interesting. The other place I think it's good is in decks that either care about doubling your tokens, so if you drop this and it's making 4 tokens, that's quite a bit better than the 2 tokens. I still think it's probably worse than like a Hornet Queen in that aspect, but it's still pretty good. On top of that, I think that it could be really good if you're in a deck that already is playing a bunch of small flyers, a bird tribal deck, obviously a fairy tribal deck would be good there. And just keep in mind this does have Ward 2 as well, so it's got a little bit of protection to avoid the blowout of this getting removed before your next turn, even if you're not doing the haste stuff. So I think Shadow Puppeteers is a little bit underutilized, and it's a really interesting and fun card at the very least. Best of the worst is Court of Locthwain. For 2 and 2 black, we get an enchantment. When Court of Locthwain enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. If you're the monarch, until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with Court of Locthwain without paying its mana cost. I think this whole court cycle is really interesting, but Court of Locthwain in particular is really excellent. It's always going to draw you that first card due to the monarchy when it comes out, and then on that next upkeep, you get to start drawing off of your opponent's libraries. That's slightly worse because you don't know what they've put in their decks. You can't guarantee it's going to work with your strategy, but it's still pretty good. And then if you have the monarchy still, you get the mana advantage of being able to cast those spells for free. This is an excellent card in any deck that cares about the monarchy, cares about casting things from exile, or cares about casting your opponent's spells, and becomes an auto-include in those decks. But I think you could probably put this in any black deck and be perfectly happy with the advantage it generates for you in your card draw slot. That's it for Wilds of Eldraine Commander Best of the Worst. I had kind of a hard time finding cards that weren't being utilized that were still excellent, so the cards on this list are a little less powerful than some of the other cards on our other lists, but let me know what you guys thought overall and if I missed anything.